Hey, welcome to this guided session. We're going to talk today to you about how to autoscale workload inside the marketplace service called WebLogic Server for OCI. My name is Maciej Gruszka, and I work in Oracle as a senior director in Oracle development. And my team is responsible for cloud-native technologies in Oracle. I am very happy to run this session for you. And today, my guest speaker is Mr. Quan Won from Enterprise Cloud Native Java Product Management team. He is responsible to be an outbound product manager also for WebLogic Server for OCI. Quan, would you be able to tell me in a few words what is really WebLogic Server for OCI before we jump into the auto-scaling feature?
Yeah, hi Magic. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Sure, I'd love to talk about WebLogic Server for OCI. As you know, WebLogic Server has been available on premises for some time. And as the IT industry moves to cloud adoption, we have made WebLogic Server more relevant. And we have made WebLogic Server available on OCI as a set of offerings in the OCI marketplace. And we call these offerings the WebLogic for OCI. Basically, WebLogic for OCI enable customers to move their on-premises WebLogic Server workload to Oracle Cloud or to build new Java EE application. Now, on this slide, you can see the three key benefits that comes with WebLogic Server for Oracle Cloud infrastructure. WebLogic Server for OCI enables you to quickly provision a WebLogic Server domain through its automation. You can simply spin up any one of the offerings through a simple wizard. But under the cover, the marketplace offerings uses a set of complex configurations called stacks, which are a set of Terraform scripts. And we have other offerings which are simple images that can be launched on a compute instance. So if you choose the stacks, basically the Terraform scripts will create all the necessary resources you need to create a WebLogic domain. So within 5 minutes, you will have a WebLogic domain created with all the VCN networks, load balancers, the policies you need to connect with services. And we have many services integrated with this solution, like OCI logging service, application performance monitoring, and we have a bunch of tools available to dwell into the instances you created through the marketplace. So like patching tools and IDCS integrations and so on.
Oh, that's really cool. I can see and I understand that many customers will benefit from these automations. So however, my question might be, what if I want to make changes to the WebLogic configuration later? For example, what if I want to increase the size of my WebLogic cluster? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. The WebLogic for OCI stack is managed by the resource manager. As your workload requirement changes, you can use the resource manager to scale the domain by adding or removing managed servers. A stack also provides a convenient way of deleting the cloud resources for a domain when you no longer require them. Now, the second benefit is the flexible pricing. We offer two billing models. With universal credits, you are paying for services that include entitlements to run WebLogic on Oracle Cloud infrastructure. But you can also use the BYOL model that allows you to bring your existing license to Oracle Cloud infrastructure.
May I interrupt here for a second? So are you able to confirm that customers don't need a permanent license, but just enough to have a subscription model with WebLogic Server for OCI?
That is correct. Actually, in Oracle, you can use the BYOL program to create a compute instance and install the software you already have the license for and the support contract, obviously. Now, in particular, for WebLogic Server for OCI, we have created marketplace offering that are precisely for BYOL consumption, where you don't have to pay anything extra other than the infrastructure resources. Or you can have the universal credits, which includes the entitlement for WebLogic Server.
What about if I'm having a limited number of licenses and I would like to bring them to the cloud and expand them with some type of subscription-based services, pet as pet as you go model? Is that mixing possible?
That is an excellent question, Magic. In Oracle, we allow you to bring your Oracle software licenses and attach them to a compute instance. So if you can't meet the licensing requirement or entitlement requirement to run your WebLogic server on a compute instance, what you can do is create a WebLogic domain that includes a mix of compute instances that uses universal credit and other compute instances with BYOL licenses. So you can have a mixed model in the same WebLogic domain.
That's really cool. I think many customers are looking for that possibility today.
Yeah, now for the last benefit, OCI by itself gives you a lot of economics benefits. It has a uniform pricing across all regions. Every service that you sign up at a particular price will be the same across all regions. You also have a free guided migration service with a group called the Oracle Cloud Lift Services. This includes documents, migration guides, hands-on labs, and engineers who will help you to move your workload. We also have incentive programs for our customers who already have Oracle software running on premises. So if you bring those workload to Oracle Cloud infrastructure, we will reward you 25 cents for every dollar you bring to the cloud. And not to mention, you will also have a volume discount. So the more workload you move to OCI, the more rewards you get.
That's great. Sound like customers can make a lot of savings by moving their workload to OCI. You mentioned earlier about the integration with OCI services and features that comes with WebLogic Server for OCI. Could you tell me more about this OCI integration and the features you provide in the product?
Sure. This slide shows you the list of services that are currently integrated with WebLogic Server for OCI and its features. So, for example, if you go create a WebLogic Server for OCI stack, you can reuse existing VCNs or create new VCNs, reuse existing subnets or create new subnets. You're able to create all the OCI policies, that are required by the Identity Access Manager integration, so you don't have to reconfigure them yourself. For the provisioning, we have validation scripts also that makes sure your existing VCN meets the required policies and ports, for your WebLogic domain to be deployed. I mean, obviously, we create the compute instances as required. And by default, we create a single managed server in each instance, and the admin server is going to run in the same managed server instance to save licenses, okay, and entitlements. We also use Resource Manager to provision the stack. Basically, the Terraform scripts are invoked directly through Terraform. We have integration with other services like file service, so you can install shared file system across components or computers. We have support for database systems, autonomous databases, and XCS. We have integration with OCI logging service and also application performance monitoring. Now, for the features, you can integrate with IDCS. You can choose to use a load balancer for exposing a WebLogic cluster. You can use application performance monitoring independently, or you can put it as part of the auto-scaling configuration we have enabled. And we are releasing new capabilities almost every month.
Okay, that sounds interesting. With respect to Identity Cloud Service, are you able to explain a bit more on the kind of integration that we provide for customers?
Yeah, many customers are taking advantage of the features offered by the Identity Cloud Service to manage access to their organization. You can configure IDCS to either manage the access of WebLogic admin console or control who has access to your application. What are the roles designated to your users? Everything that you need to do is already documented. The only prerequisite you need is to go to the IDCS console to create a confidential application and then pass that during provisioning, and a WebLogic domain will be automatically configured for you.
That sounds really appealing. Okay, can you tell me a bit more about the other features?
Yeah, sure. For example, with the latest edition, we have released the auto-scaling feature. This is a very attractive feature that allows you to react in real time to workload that might be unpredictable. For example, you may experience higher demand for your application over the Christmas period. So when this happens, all you need is to extend the capacity of your WebLogic domain with more servers. So let's say, you were able to respond to 100 requests per second, and now you need to respond to 200 requests per second. If you were running, WebLogic Server on premises, then what you need to do is you probably need to buy new hardware, buy more licenses, and that is a complex process. But when you're running on the cloud, you can forget about the complexity of acquiring, new hardware and configuration, because those are automated for you. But still, you have the same problem with the licenses, as you need to, renegotiate the contract, get more licenses, etc. Once you have the license, you still have to go to the compute instances and configure the software to make it part of the cluster. So it's kind of complicated. Now, in WebLogic for OCI, we already had a scaling capability feature over a year ago, where you can just increase the number of managed servers in your cluster. And in a matter of minutes, you will have a new cluster running on any compute. And if you're running a BYOL stack, then you would not get charged for the licenses, as we assume you are bringing your own WebLogic licenses. But if you are using a universal credit or paid stack, that new node is going to be charged to you at OCPU per hour. So this flexibility is great, but it was still missing the autonomous part of it, because you still need to manually go to the stack to say, I want to increase the number of servers or decrease the number of servers. Now, with auto-scaling, we have enabled a monitoring system based on application performance monitoring. You can define the metrics to follow in your WebLogic domain with respect to specific demand. So, for example, it makes sense to monitor the CPU utilization. If your CPU utilization goes above the threshold you define, then you could say, hey, I need more nodes in my cluster. So you can define this threshold, and the monitoring system will detect if the capacity has gone beyond that threshold, and then trigger the alarm, which will initiate the process of adding a new node to your cluster. And in the same way, you can define the lower threshold to say when your system capacity goes below a certain percentage, let's say 50%, then the system would detect it and start scaling down by removing a node from your cluster. And this allows you to react in real time to workload that might be unpredictable. This may be due to the growth of your company or due to seasonal demand. So this allows you to handle as many requests as your domain, requires.
Oh, that elasticity sounds really fancy, and it really is. I know personally many customers who are looking for this kind of capability for a long time. Would you be able to demonstrate it for us today or walk us through this capability?
Of course, I would be happy to. First thing to do is go to the marketplace. Click on all applications. Now filter by WebLogic. This has many offerings, and I can filter by the type, which is the stack. Now let's select WebLogic Enterprise Edition. Here, I will leave the defaults. Click on Launch Stack. Again, I'm going to leave the defaults. Provide only the required fields. Provide the SSH key. The secret location for my WebLogic password. I will create a new VCN. It is recommended to use a public reserved IP address to the Bastion instance, and a load balancer service to balance the load across nodes. And I'm going to configure the observability. These are the options to configure your observability. We have integration with OCI logging and integration with application performance monitoring. When you select application performance monitoring, autoscaling will become visible. In order to provide this OCID, you need to go to the application performance monitoring. And from here, you can get your OCID like here and then go back and paste it in the field. Now, you have to provide a private data key so that the instances running WebLogic is able to publish metrics to the APM domain. And in case you create custom data keys or modify existing one, these are the default data keys generated, but you can choose to create new data keys. You just need to provide the name of this data key to be used in here. This has to be the private data key. Then you can enable autoscaling. For autoscaling, we enable multiple metrics. We just show these 4 metrics being provisioned. However, after provisioning, you will have access to multiple WebLogic metrics to generate your own alerts. In this case, I'm going to use the CPU load. The minimal threshold for scale in is going to be 10%, maximum is 80% before invoking scale out. These actions are performed by the scaling function that is configured for you. So all you have to do is provide a user OCID and authentication token. Provide an email address and launch the stack. That's all required. Now, the provisioning has finished and it took about 10 minutes. You can go to the stack that was created and click on Edit. And here you'll be able to change some of the properties. You can see this is a BYOL offering. So this option I'm going to show you is only available in WebLogic for OCI BYOL. Given that you have licenses, you have selected BYOL to bring your own license and support contract. If you ran out of licenses, let's say you only had one license to run WebLogic Server on one OCPU, but you want to extend your WebLogic domain, so you can choose to extend with the universal credit image. This image does not require you to bring a WebLogic license, but you will be billed for every OCPU hour that you use in any compute instance for any node created. So in this case, I'm going to be using a UCM image of WebLogic Server Enterprise Edition for scale out. This means any existing nodes will be using your license, but any new nodes will be using the paid image. Now I need to accept the terms of use, click Next and save changes. Now I just need to set up access to my Bastion host with the IP address given in the log and set up my browser proxy. I can now access my WebLogic console and deploy my sample app. Now I'm going to show you the alarm definitions. I have defined two definitions, one for scale out and one for scale in. And these alarm definitions are configured out of the box from the Oracle APM namespace. There are multiple metrics you can use. As I said during provisioning, it showed 4 metrics, but you can actually use any metrics available in WebLogic. Here I'm setting a 1-minute interval, and I'm collecting metrics for the entire cluster. If the cluster has multiple instances, then the metrics will be aggregated for the cluster. So if the overall workload is about 80% and lasts for 5 minutes, it will trigger an alarm. And this alarm is configured to send a notification to this topic, which is going to trigger the scale out function. Now, this scale out function will ask the resource manager to increase the number of nodes in your WebLogic domain. And resource manager will take care of creating a new compute instance, sending an email to you as a notification during provisioning using your registered email address. And once it's finished, you'll get another email notification after the autoscaling has completed. As you can see, these instances has been running for a while. I'm going to increase the workload so that you can see the cluster automatically scale out. Now, after 5 minutes, the alarm is getting triggered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the alarm is triggered. If I go to alarm status, you can see there's one alarm getting triggered. This is the alarm getting triggered, and this is the email notification you got from the scale out trigger. Now, if you go to the stack detail, we see the scale out job running, and this has already succeeded. So now, if we go back to check our cluster, now go to servers, there you go. You see a new managed server is already running. Now let's go to see the workload. And the workload is now decreasing because the work is now shared by multiple nodes. So this is basically the demo for scale out. Now if I terminate the workload that was generating as shown here, we should see the workload drop to 0.
as I am stopping all the workload. And that will eventually trigger the auto scaling. So if I go back to scaling alarm definition and then check for scale in, you can see the workload was high and then the load drops below 10%, so a notification will be sent for scaling in. And when this auto scaling happens, the minimum number of nodes, one in this case, then this is a one node operation, so nothing happens. It is configured to repeat the notification every 30 minutes for scaling down. And this is something you can configure in the alarm definition. Let's give it some time to finish. Now, it has been 5 minutes since the workload has dropped below 10% of the threshold, so a notification has been sent. If I now go to jobs, here the scale in job is still progressing. Let's fast forward now. After some time, and finally the scaling finishes. I go back to the resource manager stacks, and you can see the scale in job has finished. So if I go back to the admin console and refresh my servers, you can see now I have a single managed server. So this is automatically getting scale out and scale in depending on the workload in your cluster.
So this is how easy it is to set up auto scaling in WebLogic Server for OCI.
Oh, thanks a lot for sharing this demo. That looked really easy to use it and set up. And I really like the integration with application performance monitoring for monitoring your workload. I'm sure this will be pretty useful to our customers who are looking to handle dynamic workloads in real time. And on that, I thank you for sharing with us today on how to auto-scale WebLogic Server for OCI. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for participation in our webinar. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.